But I said, you know what, boys? As nice as those are, one day they're going to look like the sidewalks by our church here on the north side that are broken and heaved up. I said, because the ground and the weather are going to go against them. And in time, they're going to get a crack in them, a little crack, and then water will get in them, and then that explosive, that pressure. And that's the just a simple earthly way of understanding the pressure that's on you and I to conform to this world. A little bit of the world creeping in. Jesus said a little leaven leavens the whole lump. A little bit coming in does great damage. Just a little water in concrete when it freezes does great damage. And that's why the Apostle Paul warned the believers to not be conformed to this world. Don't take in some or a little because it's going to damage, but rather, he says, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove that which is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Now, we've explained or understood what it means to be conformed. Now there's an issue of being transformed. And just like last week when we learned the Greek word kosmeo for putting in order or adorning yourself, this Greek word for transformed is a word you all know. It's the Greek word metamorphe, where we get our English word metamorphosis, which means to change from one state to another. And Bob and Beverly were in the early service. They've changed from Missouri to Kansas, from one state to another. Some of you are agreeing that's not what the definition means. Y'all are tired. I can just see it. Man, y'all are just barely there. I mean, I don't even tell jokes and you're not with me. To change from one state to another would be like a caterpillar that turns into a moth or a butterfly. That's changing from one state to another, not Missouri to Kansas, okay? But the idea of change, the changing what was to what is. Be ye transformed, be ye metamorphe by the renewing of your mind. See, it's not where you live that makes you live differently. And that is why, how many of you have seen stories, or you may know family, they were having a drug or alcohol or marriage problem and they relocated. We're going to get a fresh start. But the problem followed them. The problem took root in the new place. I can't tell you how many times I used to, my first year as a public school teacher, and this is kind of maybe an unknown secret, but they give the new teachers the kind of less desirable jobs, but they don't tell them that. When I got hired, I got told that I was going to be lunch monitor for 3 periods. And I went, really? That sounds important. Well, that meant for 3 hours I was in the lunchroom with 1,500 kids and a lot of corn dogs, chili dogs, and a lot of other things. Every day, all day. I was a rookie and I got lunch duty, and that was okay. But you know what would happen? I would witness this. We would get a new student, and not to stereotype them, but if we got a student that was obviously wearing clothes that pertained to drugs and rock music and had the appearance of that, within 30 minutes of being at the new school, guess who they were sitting with? Y'all are nodding your heads. You know, and here the parents move them out of this troubled inner city to out into the suburbs to get a fresh start, but guess it was the same thing. See, you can't just change the environment and change the person. The change is from the inside outward. And that's why the word metamorphe is used here. The caterpillar doesn't change because of its surroundings. It changes because it's an internal change, and it goes into that little cocoon called a chrysalis, and then over time it comes out as a moth or a butterfly. And you and I cannot change ourselves by changing our surroundings or even turning on Christian radio or turning off a TV. That will not change you from the inside out. You've got to have the very Spirit of God to do that work. But what will bring about the desired result is that renewing of your mind. You're transformed by taking in the things that God would have you to know and to be. And that would come from this book, the Bible, It would come also from things like Christian music and Christian fellowship with other believers, Christian teaching, and God using the very Word of God with you. It's like a computer hard drive that has its disk full of junk, and then it's reformatted with the new information, and it operates in a whole new way. The old is past, the new has become, and 2 Corinthians 5:11 says, old things are passed away, behold, all things are made new, or becoming new. And I'm grateful that God does that work. We're no longer victims of the world's pressure, but we can actually become more than conquerors and be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Now, earlier I had you look in 2 Corinthians 3 about where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is what? Liberty. All right? And if you don't have the liberty of the Lord, you're in bondage yet. And so I want to show you just in passing as we conclude here that God has a certain standard for you and for me. And I want us to, I think with clothing it becomes so easy to say, well, here's what's right or wrong, or this is clearly improper. I'd like for you to turn to one verse in the Old Testament. It's in the book of Proverbs. It's in chapter 7. Proverbs chapter 7. And we're going to look at the wrong way to do something and learn from it. Proverbs chapter 7. Solomon wrote this, the wealthiest man who ever lived, and he wrote in Proverbs 7 about a young man. As Solomon was looking out the window of his palace one day, and he saw a young man at night going down to a street corner, and Verse 8, it says, passing through the street near her corner, and he went the way to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot, and subtle in heart. And last week we talked about the overattention on clothing, or the desiring to have people look at me. And I think nothing could be a more simple and clear statement. How did Solomon know who this woman was from his window? Her clothing, it shouted, I am a harlot. That is my trade, my profession. That is what I am seeking out. And so just by the clothing, there were cues given, in this case from the women towards the men, of I'm available or I am for sale in the case of a harlot. And so clothing, and I handed out a flyer at the end of the service last week called Ladies, Your Clothes Are Talking. And the concluding page said, but you control the message. So your clothes are talking, but you control the message. And the New Testament message that for all of us, men and women alike, is to adorn ourselves in modesty, not calling attention to ourselves. But what about this woman here in verse 7 and 8 and 9 and 10? She wanted to call attention. She wanted this young man to say, hey, look at me. Hey, I'm available. I'm for sale. And so often the world will say, hey, dress in a fashion, live in a fashion that says, hey, look at me. And whether it's a designer label or a cut of the clothing or the style, you're drawing undue attention to yourself. And rather, our goal as believers is to point to who? To Jesus Christ, not to myself. Now, before I was saved, I sure liked it when people looked at me and bragged about me, and I sought that. I solicited it. I wanted people to comment on me. And it is not wrong to be attractive. It's not wrong to dress well, but the over-attention is what I'm referring to. I believe the overemphasis and over-attention to appearance today is virtually out of control. The popularity, for example, of tattooing is just exponential, how popular that's gotten. And again, it's always to say, look at me, look at what I have. And this even begins in ancient times, tattooing was done to call attention to a tribe or a people group, and they wanted to be set apart as unique. And it's ironic that the more people try to be unique, the more they're conforming to